Good evening. I think I have to use this because we're recording, and so Zoom can hear and whatever. So thank you all for coming this evening. We're very excited that the Rhode Island Business Competition is offering this workshop. It's discovering your best customers. The life of your business depends on it. And we really appreciate the panel we have this evening. They're very successful entrepreneurs, and they've agreed to share their thoughts on a very important subject. And I think you'll learn a lot here. So thank you for coming. We have you in the audience, and we also have some people attending us by Zoom, including one of our presenters. So I'm sure most of you know Annette Tonti. She's our first presenter. And if you don't know, Annette is a serial entrepreneur, and she's the managing director of RIHub. And she also serves on the competition's advisory board. Our next presenter is Maggie Bachenberg, who launched, there you are over there, who launched Pointz just over 2 years ago. Pointz is a mobile app that determines and presents the safest routes for micro-mobility transportation, like bikes and scooters and skateboards. They use real-time car traffic data and crowdsourced route information from local riders to inform people of the safest route to reach their destination. And our third presenter, who will be on Zoom, is Jack Schaeffer. He's the founder and CEO of MediCircle. His business has revolutionized healthcare equity by sourcing unopened medications for patients in need. So MediCircle collects leftover oncology pills, recertifies the medicines quality, and redistributes the medication to financially burdened patients. MediCircle was actually a finalist in the Rhode Island Business Competition last year. So we're really happy to have Jack. Before we begin, I want to mention our sponsors. They include private companies, service organizations, public agencies, colleges and universities, banks, investors, and most importantly, former competitors. We're really thrilled about that. These are companies that we helped start who are now able to contribute and help support new entrepreneurs, new ideas. The organizations provide ongoing support that enables the competition to function year to year, supporting entrepreneurs and building a business framework to transform their idea into reality. We are, I believe, the largest in New England that's community-based. Most, as you know, most competitions like this are tied to a university or a specific organization. We have a very broad base of support. Since we were formed in 2000, we have over 50 previous competitors that are making a huge impact on our local economy by growing and expanding their businesses, hiring employees, and buying from suppliers and service providers. I also want to acknowledge one of our partners, Venture Cafe, who is producing tonight's event. And I want to thank Bryant University's social media team, who will be spreading the word about the competition through all our social media platforms, including Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So with that, I'm going to ask Annette to take over.
Thank you, Peggy. I'm excited to be here. I'm actually going to escape out of here and get to, I'm going to do it. All right. So it is Thursday night. It's going to be raining one of these times soon. So what we want to do is let's learn about customer discovery and let's have some fun. There's not a lot of us here. We're going to have an interactive discussion. We're going to get all of your questions answered tonight. And then we're going to hear from two amazing founders that are currently doing customer discovery, because one of the things about discovering customers is it never ends. So even though you're moving forward with your business and you're finding success, you're not done with customer discovery. It kind of continues to happen. So tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the techniques. We're going to get into some of the details. Before I do, I just wanted everybody to know about RIHub, Rhode Island's Innovation Hub. We're right here on this floor, partnered with Rhode Island Business Competition, partnered with Venture Cafe. We're one of those groups in Rhode Island that helps you to get where you need to get to with business planning, mentoring, et cetera. And we're really focused on high growth startups. Not that others aren't innovation folks too with small businesses, but we really spend our time on those that want to grow in a big way. Mass Challenge is also part of us. They're on our board, and everybody should know that right now their application is open for basically the early stage accelerator, and person who runs that across the United States is right here in Rhode Island, Hope Hopkins. We actually will be hosting a little special class if people want help with their application, but that is all about Mass Challenge. So who can answer this question? What's the one necessary condition you need to have to build a successful business? Anybody know? Not you, because you're a professor. And a paying customer. Yeah. So customer and correct. And it's really somebody who's going to pay you. That's what we're talking about here. Somebody that, is going to actually take out their wallet and be happy to, give you some money. And other than that, really, it's just kind of your idea of, kind of having some fun. So here's an interesting stat. Most of the time, if you're starting your high growth business, it's going to fail. That's just the facts. 97% of all documented, companies, and also 75% of those backed by venture capitalists. Like those people are professionals. They're supposed to know how to pick the winners. 75% of those actually fail as well. And the number one reason is because there's no market need. So this is a scenario where you fall in love with an idea. I have done it. I've done it more than once. And I know that it's the right idea. And in spite of, getting facts, you're just saying, no, but this is the right way to go. This happens a lot. It also happens a lot to people that are highly technical, and it happens to people who are scientists. Scientists love to invent things, and they firmly believe that the world needs to have this thing. And so that is why it's the number one, that really, if you don't know in advance that there's a market need, you're probably going to run into some trouble. We're going to show you a couple of books tonight. This is one of my favorites, The Disciplined Entrepreneur. Bill Aulet, who teaches at MIT. This book is so fabulous because it gives you a step-by-step guide, what to think about at every step of the way as you're trying to build your business. And it's quite, kind of prescriptive. And then also there's Danny Warshay, and probably many of you know who he is. He runs the Nelson Center for Entrepreneurship here in Rhode Island. And he's kind of a global guy. He's amazing. And he created this, recently published See, Solve, and Scale. The reason why I love that is it's that simple in the sense of you see an idea, you're in that phase of here's an idea, I'm going to roll that around. Then you're solving. Solving actually takes quite a long time usually. The solving is what we're actually, part of customer discovery is about the solving phase. I'm solving. Is this really the right way to go about solving this problem that I saw? And then there's the scale. And the problem is sometimes we entrepreneurs scale before we solve. Or we build a platform to scale and we haven't solved yet. And so we waste a lot of money and time doing that because we're entrepreneurs and we're just so anxious to get our idea out to market. So as an example, the Disciplined Entrepreneurship, the Aulet book, of the 6 themes, 3 of them are about customers. So, he's got a really nice way to kind of lay this out, but you can see here, customer is really front and center and needs to be. And so anybody know what these are, what these people are riding? Segways. Okay, anybody want to guess like the year these came out? Around year 2000, okay? In the late 90s, there was this amazing media frenzy about this. It was going to change the world. It was going to change the way we were going to travel. They were actually talking about building communities around that thing. So what we saw was this Dean Kamen, who is well-known and an amazing entrepreneur, but an inventor, moreover. He had people like Steve Jobs predicting it's going to change, be as big as the PC. Jeff Bezos called it one of the most famous and anticipated products. I remember, I was around then. It was a big frenzy, like, oh my God, this is amazing. And so it went on sale right around year 2000. And then what happened was it was unveiled 2001. And then it sold in 2 years, it sold 6,000 units. Anybody think that's a lot? No, it's not. And $100 million went into that invention, and it went to market. I will tell you that in year 2000, anybody in here I actually own one still, an iPod, way before the this little dial and all that, the iPod. That launched in year 2000. In year 2001, 450 million devices were sold. The difference between, oh yeah, in 2 years we sold 30,000, and then Steve Jobs selling 450 million. Huge. That's the one you want, not this one. Little interesting sad sidebar. So this thing got sold several times. The next guy that bought it actually died because he was riding it and fell off a cliff. Yeah, I know. It's amusing, but that is what happened. And then it got sold, and it's now somewhere in China, I believe. Somebody owns it. But this is when inventions go awry because they don't do the work to say, okay, in reality, is there a market for this? Does anybody care? So, this is the proverbial scientist saying, why do we have to talk to them? What do they have to do with, us actually, buying, having them buy something? And so, and by the way, if anybody has any questions along the way, please don't hesitate to ask. So here's the essence of what we're going to do. We need to think about, who do you want to learn from? And yes. Yes. I think they needed, well, they needed to go out and do what we're going to talk about here. They needed to find the beachhead market for a good reason. And they needed to figure out whether or not people were going to purchase it before somebody spent $100 million building it. That's actually essential if you want to build a company that's going to grow fast. So that's the essence here, is like figuring that out, and you start with the smallest beachhead. So you need to figure out what you want to learn, how will you get them to do it, how will you get to them, how do you get to the people you want to talk to, how can you make sure that it's going to be an effective session, and then how do you make sense of all that? So that's actually what customer discovery is all about. First thing we're going to do is think about the who. And it's like, if it's you and a co-founder, I hope you have more than just you, because sometimes when you just talk to yourself, you miss things. It's always good to have a partner or a couple people to bounce things off of. But you really want to brainstorm, who is going to really want to use this. And I'm going to show you this like really ridiculously small slide, but you literally have to do the work to kind of lay this out and say, okay, we think it is females between the ages of 20 and 30 who are going to love our product. But you need to figure out the things like, what are the benefits they're going to see? What's their urgency of need? What are they doing today versus using your solution? Because they're doing something. Basically, how many of them are there? Are there enough? Are they going to buy this more than once? So these are the kinds of tools, not hard to do, to find, where you want to lay this out and be very specific about it, to say, we actually think there are 3 potential markets. Females between 20 and 30, women between 50 and 70, or, men between, whatever those things are. Like, you're going to lay those out, and you're going to actually want to test them out from all these various perspectives. It looks like a lot, but it's actually, very, it's kind of very easy to think through. But you really want to figure out from that work, where do you want to start first? And the reason why is, the old saying goes, it's like, if you're trying to chase 2 rabbits going in different directions, you're not chasing any rabbits. So don't try to do a lot of these, do one. And you'll learn something, and you might learn something in a couple months and go, that's not the right one, and then start again. But you haven't spent $100 million or gone out and raised funds and have, investors, breathing on you yet. So you definitely also only have limited resources. Yeah, I mean, how much can you do, right? So that's why you want to try to find a beachhead. That is about identifying the smallest market for your product and then focusing on that and winning there. That's really the notion here, is let's go find that first market. And defining that market, it really helps you to figure out how big the business could be. And it also helps you describe your customer in detail. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to describe our persona customer. And that's an important aspect of what you want to do. This actually got a little funny when we moved it from PC to Mac, but literally a persona. And by the way, when we talk to Jack, I believe Jack, who's actually on Zoom with us and he's in Houston, they actually laid out personas. You give them a name, you let the rest of your team understand who they are, because it helps everybody line up to say, this is the person that we're selling to. Really give a picture of this person. And, little trivial things are important to know, like, oh, this guy carries 2 phones with him. Oh, and this guy, drives a Harley on the weekend. You kind of get a picture of who this is. It sounds a little funny, but it literally can line up your whole team and line up your idea, of how that works. And Jack, can Jack talk? Hey, Jack, am I right? You guys have like a persona or two that you laid out?
Absolutely. I was actually about to just type into the chat. MediCircle has one persona. Her name's Loretta. For 2 years, we have lived, breathed, our entire lives is dedicated to solving the problem for just Loretta, which is our customer persona, just like this. It has everything about her.
Is great. Yeah, it's just a way to go, and it really helps with your it helps to really focus what you're doing. So by the way, a little note on where do you find the people. Once you decide who that is, you need to figure out where you find them. And frankly, LinkedIn is one of my favorite places to go. I think there's going to be a LinkedIn session like how to really use LinkedIn, right? Perfect. I'm going to that because you can never learn enough about LinkedIn. It's really an amazing, powerful tool that we all can use. And of course, Google. I know people that literally go to conferences because they know that person is going to be at those particular conferences. You just really have to figure out where that person is and basically network your way to find them. This is LinkedIn. And just a note on if you are trying to sell to a corporation, which is different than selling direct to an individual, just know that you're still selling to an individual. So you're going to describe that person inside the company very much the same way. As a matter of fact, Jack's, Loretta, is Loretta part of a corporation?
So Loretta is an individual, but we do have another customer profile of the benefits manager at a large employer that we use.
There you go, benefits manager at a hospital. So that's that's important. But just to note, at the end of the day, when you're trying to sell to a corporation, you're really selling to a person inside of that corporation. So that's important to note. So how about some techniques? All right. So this is meant to be amusing. And the fact is, don't go to your parents and ask them, how do you do this, right? Or what do they think? Because your friends, your brothers, your wives, your sisters, they're all going to say, oh, that's really, really nice. I really like that. And in reality, that's probably not the perfect place to go. There's Jack. Oh, nice. He does deserve to be shown. There he is. Hey, Jack, we can see you now. All right. Welcome. Okay. So now, why are we talking to customers? We're going to learn the things that you don't know, confirm the correct things you think you know, and then understand, what's critical to their success. So it's really all about testing your assumptions. You're going to become a scientist. You're going to lay out your hypotheses, and then you're going to test them. That's really what this is all about, and actually what a lot of marketing is about. So how do you interview people? Well, this is like the famous saying from Henry Ford. If I asked them what they wanted, they would have said the wrong thing. They would have said a faster horse. It's hard to just go up to somebody and say, would you like this? Show it to them. They're probably going to give you answers that, aren't right. They're going to say, yeah, I do want that. That's just not going to give you the right way. So what you want to do first is you're going to identify assumptions. And I put this up. There's a great book out that's very small. It's easy. It's called Talking to Humans. I highly recommend it. And this is from that, actually, where somebody was trying to figure out a new veterinary service, a direct-to-consumer veterinary service. So they just laid out all of these assumptions that they wanted to test. Literally, just freewheel, come up with everything that you think. And again, this is better done with somebody else with you that works with you. than just yourself. But they're, basically saying, we think that a busy urbanite will, we think they're going to be our early adopters. That's an assumption. You can test that, right? We could recruit enough vets across the country to make this as big, make this a big enough business. Well, you're going to have to talk to vets because they're making an assumption that they can recruit enough vets to make this happen. So literally lay it out. There's only 7 assumptions here. That's not too bad, but it'll take a little bit to come up with those. That is an important first step. And then you're going to write out a guide, a interview. And the reason why is not because you're going to read those. You're not going to hold us up and read them. It's basically meant to be a guide for you. When you're sitting there and having a conversation with another human, it's kind of hard to just read it off the script because they're going to take you in a different direction. But it gives you guidance while you're doing it, especially if you're doing it early and you're kind of nervous about it. But it's like, ask some basic questions. And then, what you're doing is you're kind of eating around the question, or you're not going directly at it. You're not saying, if you had this service, would you do it? By the way, I've had this problem. I'm kind of a sales guy. I enjoy sales. So a lot of times when I try this, I have to hold myself back from saying, you'd really like this, wouldn't you? Like I really get into the sales mode, which is like, you gotta check yourself. But these open-ended questions are wonderful. What did you like about that experience? Imagine they're gonna tell you stuff you didn't have a clue. And that's an open-ended question. It's not like, did you like this experience? But it's, hey, what did you like? What was frustrating? What worked? Describe the last time you had to take your pet to the vet for a checkup. Just describe it. And then you're going to learn stuff there. Now you're going to need to either, tape them or be good at, taking the notes. But it's very important to get those kind of answers because that's really what you're digging at here is that kind of information. So bad questions, asking them to speculate about your project or, talking technology to them. That's not solving a problem. Don't talk about, it's an app and, and it shows maps and, that you can't really do that because now you're just leading them. And that's not really going to be helpful for you. Good questions. Talk about, why. Asking why is a really great one, by the way. You think about how many times you say, well, why? Let them come back and tell you why. And then, for example, you can never ask the question, is low cost is that really something that, is important to you? Because most of the time people are going to say, yeah, that's just, but what role does cost play in your decision making? Does cost play any role in your decision making? That's a better question than, is it important, to be low cost for you? And then the interviewing methods are important. The number one best way to do this is in person. We teach this during COVID and we're like, we get it. You can't do that right now. So video conference was fine. It's just not as good. Reason why is when I talk to you, I'm going to see things on your face that you wouldn't normally see. Like most of the information coming to us is, from facial recognition ideas that facial expressions that we didn't really know much about. And then I know that people love to text. Don't use text. It's not going to help. This is not the way to go. Email is not the way to go either. Because people will sit back, they'll think, this is really an in-person thing if you can do it. Not even good if you did a phone call like we saw before. You don't know what the other person's doing. It might be, feeding the dog and, all that kind of stuff. So you really want to get them in person if you can. Always prepare, know who they are, document your interview plan, etc. So how can this go wrong? Well, it could go wrong if you kind of make some bad assumptions. Maybe you didn't do enough interviews. I've done that before where I thought, oh, I did enough. I heard what I wanted to hear and I went on, right? You really have to get to like 50 of these to actually make it work. And then talking to people that like you, to people like you that are just like you, or actually people that like you, like your friends, and hearing only the good news. I've been having that problem. So you don't want to sell, you don't want to talk technology, and then this last one here is like a kid in the candy store, which is really kind of all about asking them what they want to hear, right? And they're going to give you the answers that they want to give you. So here's some books. I said Talking to Humans is great. The startup owner's manual is also good. And then the discipline entrepreneurship is quite good. And so the art of being a great entrepreneur, it's really finding that balance between your vision, what you believed that this idea was going to be, and then reality. And that sounds like a simple statement. It's actually not that simple, because in the entrepreneur's mind, you've invented this idea, this thing, and you really believe in it, or you wouldn't get up every day and do what you're doing with passion. And that's the danger. I work with entrepreneurs all the time right now, and I see all the time that they're holding steady on something that, in the face of data coming back at them, might be telling them like, no, it's not quite working. You're going to have to pivot or find something else. And so that is the essence of the trouble with being an entrepreneur, because we all fall in love with our ideas, and we all believe that our ideas are kind of the best. So with that, we're going to have some open discussion. First of all, any questions, comments? Anybody? Looks like Riley, you got a question? No? Yeah. We're going to do this so Jack and the people can hear us.
I was just saying that this is my favorite part of early stage business building. Along with the other books that Annette shared, another really great read is The Mom Test. It's like a customer discovery Bible, and the reason why it's called the Mom Test is because you wouldn't normally ask your mom customer discovery questions, because she doesn't want to hurt your feelings, and because she loves you, and she's always going to say that your product or service is a great idea. The same goes for your friends. So it really is important to find the actual personas that you're creating, and not asking your buddies and your family, because they're going to steer you in the wrong direction every single time. And the second thing I wanted to mention, I'm not sure how many people in this room are familiar with ChatGPT or other AI writing tools. If you want to create really good customer discovery writing questions, you can ask ChatGPT to create questions based on one of these books around a problem that you're trying to solve. And it will generate a list of questions that you should be asking your potential customer. So just want to give that for a tip. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you. That's really good, excellent advice there. I didn't think about the ChatGPT, but that makes sense. Yes.
You deal with something that is medical related. So if your solution is to respond to an urgent medical need, right? So there is a need, and customer, you assume, are the patient. How is different, and how is?
I think you're bringing up a really good point. Actually, it's interesting. Jack's about to talk, and he's in the healthcare world. Anybody here have some thoughts on how that's different? Other than the question is about the buyer and the user, and if it's a doctor, you might want to talk to them. Yes.
Speaking as somebody who is married to one of those doctors, has been a hospital trustee for 30 plus years, I think the issue there is efficacy and cost. The interesting thing is actually the medical community is relatively slow on adoption as compared to many other industries. And they're slow in part because they've been burned. I mean, I'm old enough to know there's, thalidomide, where you had people who didn't have arms because in UK they approved a drug that wound up being a bad thing. And that's always thrown out by the US, by FDA, as we were smart, we didn't do that. So it winds up being, it's a long road in many cases. It requires usually a champion in the field, in an institution, because somebody will champion your product. And then it's very much a cost analysis, a cost benefit analysis.
Thank you. That's great. Yes.
Payers at the end, right? But these are also the most difficult to reach for a startup, for an entrepreneur, my stage, for example. And I experience LinkedIn is not that useful for that type of target. So any other suggestions?
Yeah, so what is it? Is it a device that you're building? Okay. Have you been introduced to NEMIC at all? Oh, good. Okay. Because they have this is a deep dive, and it's a specialty vertical. And they would, I would believe, have a better way of discussing, the best practices for that. Because you're right, it's not a straight line. And, and it's a multi-pronged market, because you have the doctors, the physicians, you have the payers, which are often insurance, and you have the end patient. So there is more complexity there. You still need to do some of the work, depending on what it is. But anyway, yeah.
When you talk about doing the work, one of it is that your customer, in the sense of who's going to use it or benefit from it, is often not the same as your customer for purposes of who you're going to sell to, who you have to convince. I think that's one. I mean, retail is a little more straightforward. The person who's going to use your product is the buyer. They're sort of the customer all around. Healthcare, it is not. There are many intermediaries that will decide whether or not your product is useful.
And I don't know whether Bambi's got something to say about it too, because she's in the middle of what you're doing. I don't know if you. Oh, good. Yeah. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I know you're also in the healthcare.
Segment, the question came up, so we do real-time wearables for thyroid diagnostics, and okay, we have a direct-to-patient sale model, but then we have the business model that goes through the whole insurance plan, so it also can flip over into corporate reimbursable wellness programs. And then we also, so that's 2 of our customers, but then the endocrinologist platform and wellness centers, and I mean, yes, 100%.
It's complicated, but it's important, because you're going to learn something at every step. So without further ado, Jack, thank you for being patient. Jack actually is a graduate. He and his co-founder are graduates from Brown University. They're still connected to Rhode Island, but they're living in Houston right now because they're working in Texas with MediCircle. So Jack, tell us a bit about MediCircle, and then tell us a bit about how you've been doing, you and Eliza have been working through customer discovery problems.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, nice to meet you all. My name is Jack, Rhode Island alum. I was part of Mass Challenge. Annette has been a mentor of MediCircle and of mine personally for a few years now. And for a little bit of background on me, I am the co-founder and now CEO of MediCircle. MediCircle is addressing healthcare disparities by collecting unused cancer medications, recertifying their quality, and ultimately distributing them to patients who couldn't otherwise afford them. To date, we've raised $1.2 million in pre-seed funding. We launched 3 months ago, and we are now collecting $100,000 worth of medication every week to be able to get to patients who couldn't otherwise afford it. Regarding customer discovery, I have so much I want to talk about. It's my favorite thing. It was what I was taught for 3 years, and it was the only thing I was taught. And I think whoever answered the question about the mom test, great job. That was on my list of things I wanted to mention. So I'm going to start with when I started at Brown. I immediately got connected to the entrepreneurship scene, and all I wanted to do was start building products and building startups. I had already gone through Y Combinator school, Techstars Toolkit, all of it. I said, I know what I'm doing. Let me go after it. And my mentor at the time, Jonas Clark, tried everything in his power to stop me from building things. And the framework that Annette brought up, which is see, solve, scale, all I wanted to do was start solving, the second step. And I never really learned the C part. And so for 2 years, I was just solving and solving and solving and having the exact problem that Annette brought up, which is nobody wanted whatever the heck I was building. Besides me, I thought it was really cool, of course. And Jonas, then I went to Jonas and said, hey, I've been failing for 2 years. I need your help. And he took me under his wing and would just send me out to go talk to random people with no aim whatsoever, but asking the exact same questions that Annette would ask them, or Annette brought up. So what are your problems? What is your day like? Can I just walk with you for the next 6 hours to see what your day looks like and just take notes about random people's jobs, random people? And that ultimately led me to, I landed at Tufts Medical Center. And while at Tufts Medical Center, my co-founder, Eliza, the reason I was there was because I was talking to Eliza, my co-founder, and she had noticed a problem with an unmet need of wasted medication. So I was just there. I had no healthcare background and kind of fumbling my way around Tufts Medical Center, doing exactly what Annette said, which is just talking to anybody who would listen to me, secretaries, doctors, nurses, anesthesiologists. Even in the back room, I was talking to the janitor at the end of the day, just asking them these questions. And I quickly learned that there was this huge issue with wasted medications because of previously I was doing interviews, probably 40, 50 a week with people. And so while at Tufts Medical Center, we noticed this huge problem. And we started with anesthesia because that was the department and the doctor that was kind of who brought us in. But doctors all over were saying, hey, Jack, come check this out. Look at all this waste. And we would go from area and wing of the hospital and of the center and seeing wasted medications all across the board. And that was when we really started to learn about this unmet need and this problem. And I think the most important thing for us was if I had gone in with a preconceived notion, because I actually went to Tufts Medical Center with an idea of something I wanted to start selling to people, I never would have come across this problem of wasted medications. And so I think that was the most important thing for us. And so that was the first step, which was going in without a preconceived notion and just learning. From there, we had won the 𝐋𝐄𝐀𝐑𝐍 Choice Award. We got $350 to start doing a bunch of bottom-up research. So we spent every day, I was skipping all of my classes to drive across Rhode Island to just speak with people. And same thing, asking them these questions, trying not to use the preconceived notions. And we performed 350 bottom-up research interviews. So I went back to Jonas and said, Jonas, I did 350 interviews. Can I get started and start building MediCircle? And he said, absolutely not. Keep doing them. So we ultimately ended up, before I was even allowed to start building, Jonas wouldn't even give me permission to start even thinking of the idea of collecting these meds or reusing them or doing anything that MediCircle is now. He made me do 1,200 interviews over the course of a year. So you can do the math there. It was about 4 or 5 every single day for the entire year, and Jonas would not let me start building. And I think those were the interviews that really built MediCircle, since we learned so much about every person across the industry. And after 1,200 interviews, we thought we were set. We knew exactly what we were doing. We were ready to go. And after 1,200 interviews, we began building. We had this concept, we had this idea, we had a contract, we had the facilities. And we were invited to pitch to a large healthcare system, one of the biggest hospitals in the country. I can't obviously say the name. We ultimately pitched. It was 3 days long. We spoke with every single stakeholder that we thought, and it went great. Every single one was ready. They said, all right, let's move it on. They sent the contract to legal, and we heard nothing. We didn't hear back for months. And we kept calling them. They said, yeah, it'll come, it'll come. And eventually we heard back that legal said, absolutely not. There's no way in heck we'll ever do this. And we were devastated. We said, what? We had built everything. And what we realized was we hadn't done enough bottom-up research interviews. We had done 1,200 interviews, and it was not enough. And I think that was the biggest takeaway from that lesson. So the biggest takeaways for me is you can always be doing customer discovery. You should always be speaking with people and making sure you're speaking with everybody across the value chain. So I know someone asked about healthcare. It's not just the end user. It's not just the doctor. There's probably 30 other people you have to interview. And it's making sure that you release those preconceived notions. So I hope that helps, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
That's great. Anybody have questions? Okay. Prashanta's got a question. Here.
Yeah, I can't hear unless you give them the mic, so.
Thanks for sharing your first-hand experience. So one thing is that you meet random people and see if they're potential customers. And second is that how do you know that how much more to do, like 50, 100, 1,000 and something like that? Because that means you have to allocate your time, energy, sometimes money, right? It just can't be arbitrarily large. So how do you set that boundary?
So I'll answer the second question, which is how much is enough? And that's something that I think we're still learning. Since we had thought we had done enough, now we think we've done enough, but really we don't know. And I think you'll never really know if it's enough. But what you will always know is when you start to see trends and patterns and analyzed as many breadths of opportunity as you possibly could have. And so for us with 350, we had categorized them just like Annette had taught, where you want this group of people and this group of people. And by speaking with them, we started to be able to takeaway patterns and trends that by 60 interviews with one group of people, you'll start to notice when you ask them a question, what the first 5 things that will come out of their mouth is. And that's when you start to become a real expert of what their daily lives are. And when you start, Annette didn't bring this up, but we would spend a lot of time saying, hey, can we just watch you? And we would watch everybody do their daily job. So I was, at some point I worked as a janitor with a janitor. I worked as a secretary. I worked as a receptionist. All the way up to I just followed doctors who obviously didn't let me do their job, but I got to follow them along and could start to really picture what their day-to-day was like and understand, so that when you were out of that context and you began discussing solutions, if an unknown question came up, you could say, well, I spent the day with them, I interviewed them, I kind of know how they would react and what they're looking for. And the big one for us was always, what are their KPI, which is their key performance indicators? At the end of the day, how do they know they're successful? What are they thinking about? And can you repeat your first question, please?
Is that good? That was good.
Awesome.
Yes, Bambi.
Since I'm a chemist, Jack, I want to know, who is your requalification team for these medicines? And is there just one? Because if there's several medicines, you're going to have multiple applicable testing methods for that particular drug, substance, and drug product.
Great question. Thank you very much. So we use a 28-step verification process that you can break down into 3 steps. So the first is our software, which uses visual inspection, machine learning, and AI to be able to look at the medication while also geographing its history and pedigree via NDCs and GTIN barcodes. So we're able to track what kind of medication it is, the medication's history, so all the way back to the manufacturer who produced it, and everything from who the original the dispensing pharmacy was, the distributor, et cetera. From there, 2 pharmacists separately visually inspect the medication, who are both trained, both have over 20 years of experience in the industry. They visually inspect the medication to make sure it's up to their qualifications, both that they have set separately, as well as our software has for the medication. Lastly, we send it to a third-party potency assay group who performs chemical analysis that the original manufacturer would have done on the medication as well.
I want to get on, by the way. Yeah,
Sorry, I'm taking up time.
I don't know anything about microbial.
Microbial. What about
Talk about
microbial testing?
Sorry.
What about microbial?
Currently, we do not perform microbial testing. Would be interested in learning more if that's another way that we can verify our medication's quality to a higher degree.
All right. So we'll introduce you offline because this is away from customer discovery. So, all right. Thank you, Jack. Please hang out if you'd like to. Thank you for joining us from Houston. And I really want to get to Maggie. So Maggie Bachenberg, and actually, here you go. Many of you know her. She hangs out with us a lot at RIHub. We're lucky enough that she also just finished Techstars. So take it away, Maggie. Tell us a little bit about your company and customer discovery.
Cool, yeah. So we're a safety-focused mapping app for people who ride on bikes and scooters, specifically in urban areas. And yeah, you can think of it as like a Waze for bikes.
Doesn't sound like it's on. It's green though, right?
Yeah. Okay,
How about this
is that
one?
better? Okay, great. Yeah, so safety-focused mapping app for people who ride bikes and scooters in cities. And yeah, the app is launched out on the App Store. We have a few thousand users, and I just got done with Techstars, and so now we're back here in Rhode Island, which is where we're based. So yeah, and then you wanted me to talk a little bit about customer.
How do you do customer discovery? How you think about it, how you guys do it.
Yeah, so like Jack, we did a lot of customer discovery initially at Brown before we built anything. And it was a lot of talking to people in person, but since it was COVID for a good chunk of that, it was over Zoom and over the phone. And it would be people who ride their bikes, essentially. And we didn't really limit that definition a whole lot, but it was like the end user. So the people who use our app now are the end users. And we weren't doing a whole lot of customer discovery around who the buyer would be. We were just trying to figure out if there is a need for something in the bicycling space. And yeah, I had had an idea that we needed a long distance biking tool because I had done a long distance trip and had a rough time mapping out like a route and figuring out what the conditions were like. But it turns out there aren't that many long distance cyclists that go and bike, thousands of miles that often. And so the customer discovery eventually led us to focus more on people who ride in urban areas. And that we still do customer discovery. Right now we're doing it more with the end or like the buyer. And what we're doing with the end user is a little different. It's figuring out how close our product is to product market fit for the end user. And it's a much different process because you're actually working with the product versus asking open-ended questions and figuring out, what to build or how to sell if it for the buyer. But yeah, that's kind of what we've done so far.
What's the difference between a buyer or an end user for you?
Well, the end user is the person who's using the app for to get around on their bike. So they're searching for routes. They're just a person, like me. But the buyer is somebody who will actually pay for the solution. Sometimes the end user and the buyer are the same person for a lot of products. But for ours, we're looking at a couple different models, some where the end user is the buyer and some where the end user doesn't pay. And we have a separate buyer who's giving us money for something that the user kind of produces. And so that might be data. A lot of times it is data, especially like in our case, but it can be a variety of other things like ad space and that sort of thing.
I was going to ask you about ads. So one of the models for you is to actually eventually have advertisers on the platform. Have you started talking to advertisers?
We're not looking at advertisers right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of research with two different personas. So one of them is last mile enterprise companies, and so
So like the scooters I see down there, those kind of companies?
people that are delivering on bikes and scooters, mostly actually in New York. There's not a lot of that. You actually can deliver on Postmates on a bike here. I've done it before, but it's not very common. So it's focused more on New York for that. And then partnerships with add-on devices that integrate with the software that we're building. And so we are working on actually a partnership with somebody for that. So have done customer discovery with a few of them, and now are moving into solution building.
Great. You guys just launched a new upgrade today, right?
We did, yeah. We added a couple of new features.
So if you're a bike person or a local scooter person, check out Pointz on the App Store. It's really, really cool. And anybody have any questions for, yeah.
Yeah, so right now, the way we think about it is we have the app working in across the US, but we have populated the data visually in all urban areas. So there's like 350 urban areas. But what we do for everything else, like marketing and that sort of thing, is we're focusing in on a few cities. And we're looking at cities that are in warmer climates at the moment. Yeah, because there's not as many people biking.
Are cities interested in your data in the sense that they are interested in expanding the trails that are safety trails for bikers?
Yeah, they are interested in it. They're interested in it partially because the persona that we have on our platform is not the persona who they have data for right now. They have a lot of data from Strava, which is a fitness app, and it tracks people that are riding for fitness mostly, sometimes recreationally, but mostly fitness. And it's a much different persona than the average person that's riding around. And mostly cities actually want to cater to people who are just using their bikes for transportation. And so that's something that we found they're interested in, which is fun.
That's interesting, yeah. Anybody else? Any questions? Yeah.
When you say we, who is we?
Yeah, so I have a co-founder, Trisha Balakor. She's also based out of Rhode Island. And then we have a full-time software engineer in Pennsylvania. and then a few software engineers out of India as well.
And what is your experience with your engineers out of the US?
Out of the US, well, we just have Karen, and she's great. She actually has over 20 years of mapping experience. She worked at MapQuest a while back, and she's great. She's back end, so she does a lot of like complicated things for us. It's a really tough job, but she does a great job.
By the way, when you do that, you have to find people like Trisha that know how to manage that, the technology, like that has to be tightly managed, well managed.
Very well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Think about a new city. Do you send somebody to the city to interview people in the street, or how does this customer discovery works?
Yeah. Well, for right now, like with the end user, what we're doing is product market fit surveys over Zoom. And so that is not live and in person. And honestly, like the buyer customer discovery isn't usually in person either because it's people all over the place. But if we can do it in person, we will. And yeah, we do observe, like when we go to new places, we'll like go and watch people like, checking out city bikes from city bike stations and seeing like are they pulling out their phone? Are they searching for a route? Or what are they doing after they get the city bike? How are they putting their phone in their pocket? Are they, plugging in earphones? We're looking for like those types of things. What was that? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, whenever we can. And I mean, there's people riding around here too. And so you can kind of like observe certain things that people are doing. We've done like going up to people at like conferences for sure, but I haven't ever solicited anybody that's just out on their bike riding around unless I knew them.
And that, by the way, really good point. It's actually hard, right? It's actually like you've got to talk to people that are strangers, and you kind of have to find a way to have a rapport so that you don't look like some stranger coming up and accosting them while they're just trying to get on their scooter and go, for God's sake. But yeah, I mean, this is an art, right? And it's actually, there's a bit of, that same feeling in sales where you have to have the right kind of approach. So again, people aren't kind of afraid of what it is that you're doing. So yeah.
Yeah, you can sometimes get away with things though that aren't like direct customer discovery or like a full interview. Like if you just are like going up to them and being like if you're, unlocking your bike on the bike rack and they're also unlocking their bike, you could be like, oh, hey, like, what do you use for a mapping app? I'm trying to find a better solution. And then, start a conversation, but I wouldn't be like, hey, would you like to ride with me for 30 minutes?
Right.
It works for some people.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, it is. I won't undersell that it's hard to make those, but it's really important to do it. Jack walked around with doctors and physicians and janitors, and he did it. But there is a personality thing you gotta get over there. Yeah.
And I found it easier to just set up calls ahead of time. I thought that was I didn't mind reaching out, and LinkedIn is great. And I did a lot of the initial reaching out when I was a student, and people just talk to you for.
If you can pull out the student card, it's great.
Yeah, it really helps.
Terrific. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you all for joining.
There is just one question here in the chat that I want to answer
Please.
from R.I. Palmers. He said, can someone address how you conduct the customer interview? Do you ask the question and then write it down or record the interview? How do you tabulate and analyze the results? So first of all, based on the question, it sounds like you're a very mathematical person, and I get that. I was an applied math major in college. One of the hardest parts about this is while they do call startups a grand experiment, you do have to kind of take that scientific method and the very mathematical and quantitative part out of this. A lot of it is qualitative. Learning the themes and navigating what each person's persona is a large part of it. So when tabulating and analyzing the results, you typically want you and your co-founder to, at the beginning, we would go together, and then we would separate to try and cover as much ground as possible. But the beginning stages, we wanted to make sure that we were on the same page about how we would conduct them. And in regards to recording the interview or writing it down, I always just take notes in a book. And if it's over Zoom, you can sometimes ask to record it. And while I was just living, but a lot of it is stored because at least from the books I've read, yes, it's quantitative. A lot of it is kind of this gut innate feeling that you have to start learning and navigating those patterns. And that comes with hundreds, if not thousands of interviews. Maggie, I'm sure you have a great answer as well.
Parts of its brain.
All right. I do record interviews on Zoom if I can, because what I do is I use a tool called Otter to transcribe them. And then I'll copy and paste answers into a spreadsheet, and then I'll make word clouds out of them sometimes to help identify themes. And it helps because when I go back and I'm looking at the interviews, I want to make sure that I'm not lying to myself about what I heard. And so I will, like, if we're looking at a hype or an assumption and I think it's something and Trisha thinks it's something else, we'll go back and we'll like count how many people said, you know, yes, how many people said no, how many people we didn't get a clear answer from, and we can actually look at something a little bit more quantitatively. But I do agree that, yeah, it's a lot of qualitative analysis as well. So
I think that's interesting. I think particularly the word cloud thing I find interesting because I think so many of us hear what all hear through our own personal filters. I've always noted that when I'm in a partners meeting with 11 people, you're lucky if you only have 11 versions of what happened. So I think that's very interesting and would give you a feel for what you're really hearing as opposed to what you're focusing on yourself. I think that's fascinating. Yeah. Of course.
So I was curious, Jack, when you pivoted, as you said you had a product at first, did you pivot after meeting your co-founder and she brought up that idea, or was it during the interviews? I was curious how you came to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So at the very beginning, it was something Jonas, he always used the analogy, he was holding me by the collar, because he wouldn't let me start even using words that would sound something like a solution. He always only allowed me to speak in any way about the project, if I was even calling it a project, about identifying a problem. So he would, and Maggie, I know you work with Jonas, he would kind of like snap or say no whenever you would bring up, if you were talking when we first started, when I came to him and said, hey, I found this unmet need of waste medication. What if we took them? He would go, hey, like, stop that. You don't get to talk that way, until I did enough interviews to really understand the problem. So when we're talking about pivoting, I never even had a concept yet. My goal was really just to dig in as much as I could to understand the problem. And the teaching was, do not start coming up with a solution until you understand what the problem is. So with all of those, we really were just learning as much as we could. Then I talked about another story where we pitched to a large healthcare. At that point, obviously, you need to have a solution. And I think you need to be ready to pivot quickly until, like Maggie mentions, the long-term goal is product market fit, but the early goal is really just developing a value proposition and making sure that you're addressing the problem. And so when we had that issue, we pivoted quickly to take our solution and take legal either entirely out of it, or we added another solution, which is now where we landed, which makes legal very happy. And I think those pivots are crucial, and you have to always be ready to pivot until you find product market fit. And that's kind of where the idea of Paul Graham calls startups a grand experiment. It's because the chart of a startup is very flat and then it explodes. They call it hockey stick growth. And that's because the entire beginning is learnings and pivots and changing and perfecting. And then once you have what Maggie calls product market fit, then you're allowed to explode. The goal is you don't want to explode until you have figured it out. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually found one of the more interesting slides, the beachhead customer slide. I remember I had a client probably about 15 years ago. They made an electric scooter, but it wasn't a little thing. It was really on a par with a big motorcycle, but it was electric. The technology was a challenge because battery science wasn't where it is today, and today it's still a challenge. But you didn't have electric cars back then at all. You didn't have hybrids. But they had an electric scooter, and the technology wowed everybody. And over the course, they'd been in business developing prototype, et cetera, and they had their scooter. And over about 14 months, they raised between private funds, private placements, and an IPO on the AIM in London. They raised $156 million over 14 months. And I remember talking to the CEO the day after they closed the IPO. And he said, "I don't think we have enough money." Sort of blew me away. And they didn't have enough money because what they elected to do, despite a number of people advising them otherwise, was to qualify the product in virtually every country in the world. Which, you think about this, this is a regulated product. I mean, you have to go through and get Department of Transportation approval. You have to have manuals in multiple languages. I mean, it was craziness. Instead of identifying where scooters, there were markets and made sense that you could test and see if you could make it. I mean, London had a ban on bringing in a petrol-fueled vehicle into downtown London. There were places that were logical beachheads for them, and they basically just went everywhere because they thought they had to establish themselves worldwide. Crazy, and they didn't succeed. They wound up getting bought and finally fizzling off into thin air. So I just thought that was really fascinating. That knowing who your primary customer is, where you're going to find out whether or not it really can be done, and not spend $156 million failing. I mean, obviously people thought they had a great idea and a great product, or they wouldn't have raised 156. So we recorded this. It's going to be, we're going to send it out in an email, a link to it later, right, Beth? Our next one is a very popular one. It's called Find Those Funds. Everybody wants to know where the money is. We'll have 3 panelists who'll give you tips on determining what's the best course of action to fund your business. It's going to be here on Thursday, March 2nd at 5:30. We hope to see you all then. And not to forget, the competition is open now. I think our cutoff date is March 27th, right? That all applications at 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock. We always get people who say they had a technological glitch at the last minute and want permission to submit afterwards. We're not very kind about that. Maybe if somebody's grandmother died, I don't know. So anyway, I want to thank you all for coming. It's been wonderful having you, and I hope you learned something. I always do. It's amazing. Years go by, and every time I learn something new. So thank you. Thanks to our panelists.